For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. On infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections.
If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who want it until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious.
Violence and vandalism is being led by Antifa and other radical left-wing groups who are terrorizing the innocent, destroying jobs, hurting businesses, and burning down buildings. They are coming after me because I am fighting for you. That's what's happening.
Greetings, fellow thought criminals, and thank you for joining the Insurrection. I'm Michael Lauber. This is Derrick Evans. It's Tuesday, and we've got a fantastic show lined up for you today.
That's right. And as always, guys, like, share, subscribe, all those good things. Leave us comments if you're watching live. We'll try to answer any questions, all those things. We've got an awesome guest lined up for you guys. You guys have probably seen him all over the place lately for, unfortunately, bad news. But we got Jeff Younger with us, who is a true patriot and is fighting for his son and all parents across the country. Jeff, thanks for joining us, man.
Howdy. Glad to be here.
Well, yeah, we're glad to have you. And I really want to highlight your story and also your just immense knowledge on this subject and many others, try to connect some dots for some people. Before we get into that, I kind of like to always start off with something a little light. And there is a great clip I want to play from CNN from Harry Enton. You guys saw me highlight this guy over and over during the election, that he was about the only honest person on CNN. And he gave them some news yesterday I don't think they like to hear. And keep in mind, this is on the heels as yesterday we had ratings come out again. And the Hallmark Channel is now beating both CNN and MSNBC, which I think is just freaking hilarious. So let me roll this real quick, and then we're going to get into it.
President Trump's transition net approval. You go back to November of 2016. Look at this. He was just at plus 1 point. Just at plus 1 point. That is well below the historical norm. Look at where we are today. Significantly higher, plus 18 points. That's 17 points higher on the presidential transition net approval rating. The bottom line is this. If 8 years ago Americans were lukewarm on Donald Trump, at this particular point, they're giving him much more the benefit of the doubt. A lot more Americans are in love with this transition. This much more meets the historical norms where normally presidents get that boost coming out of their victory. And what we're seeing here is Donald Trump's presidential transition is getting a thumbs up, and dare I say, 2 thumbs up from the American people.
And, we're still on the appointment phase at this point, but it does give insight to sort of where this team is thinking to lead some of these key departments, of course. I mean, but how do people feel about the prospects of his presidency, given the context of some of these picks?
Yeah, it's not just that they like what Donald Trump is doing right now. They're optimistic for the future. So, again, let's compare ourselves now versus where we were 8 years ago. And what you see 8 years ago, 53% of Americans were scared or concerned, the majority towards the upcoming Trump term. Look at where we are now. The shoe is on the other foot. 53% of Americans are excited or optimistic. It's flip-flop, where a narrow majority 8 years ago were scared or concerned about the upcoming Trump term. Now what we see is that the majority is excited or optimistic about the Trump term. So what we're just seeing is very different numbers from where we were 8 years ago. 8 years ago, folks really were not that in love with the Trump transition. Now they are, and more than that, looking forward to the upcoming Trump term. 8 years ago, the majority were scared or concerned. Now the majority are excited or optimistic.
That's good news, and that's a huge change. The country's behind us. We've got some momentum, and it's time to fix a whole lot of problems that we've been dealing with for decades now.
Well, I think it comes down to the fact that people know what life is like under President Trump. In 2016, a lot of people bought into all the stuff and you know the fear mongering because they didn't know. But this go around, it's like, well, they can only fear monger so much because people had already experienced life under a Trump presidency, and it was way better under President Trump than it has been the last 4 years. So I think that that's why those numbers are flipped, and it's sad that 46% of the people out there are still brainwashed to the point of actually being fearful, but that's the time that we live in today.
Agreed. Well, I think it's more than just the numbers, and people, like you said, they know what to expect from a Trump presidency, but it's also the fact that they like what they're hearing in the direction that we're going to be going. In general, people want to get this border invasion taken care of. And I think this also gives us a huge opportunity to highlight a lot of these systemic problems and end them. And we're going to be discussing a major one of those today. So, Jeff, I want to go ahead and get started here. If you could kind of give our audience some background on your case, on what you've been dealing with for years now, and then where things are today. The floor is yours.
Well, I mean, it's been a 10-year battle. You know, my ex-wife started transitioning my son when he was 2.5 years old. By the time he was 3, it had become such an issue in our marriage that she filed for divorce. She's a pediatrician, and she used her relationships with licensed care providers to force me out of my own house. I moved a mile up the road for my kids. And, you know, my son just passed his 3rd birthday with me, starts telling me that mommy is teaching him that he's a girl and he thinks he's a girl. And that was the first iPhone video I'd ever taken. If you go into YouTube and you search for mommy says I'm a girl, you'll see it. She ramped it up to really start socially transitioning him. She began presenting him to the world as a girl. I would take my son to school in 1st and 2nd grade in boys' clothes, and the teacher would give him a dress. He'd put on a dress, and they'd make him use the girls' restroom. And they did that behind my back for over a year before I found out about it. Turns out that's legal in all 50 states, and I can explain how they're doing this legally.
Yeah, please do, because I had not heard that before.
Yeah. So you want me to do that now?
Yeah, if you could. That's I mean, it's a little aside, but that's news to me.
Yeah. So in all 50 states, medical doctors, actually all medical practitioners, even nurses, psychology practitioners, psychiatrists, and social workers can exert a right of privacy for the child against the parent. The idea was that if they're told about abuse, they don't want to have to tell the parent that the child said that. So they have a right to exercise privacy for the child against the parent. And they do not have to inform the parent that they have used that right. So on that basis, what's happening is a school nurse or a school counselor, most of the school counselors are social workers, they're not psychologists, will exert a right of privacy for the child and then secretly transition the child as part of quote unquote therapy. And this is why it's very important for conservatives to understand you must never leave your children alone with licensed care providers. Never, ever give them the opportunity to exert that right of privacy. In most pediatrician well checks now, doctors are instructed to do this by the American Academy of Pediatrics. They'll ask the parent to leave the room for part of the exam. And they talk to your child in private. And they ask things about sexual activity, abuse, all kinds of things. Don't do that. Don't let them.
So Jeff, this is one of those things where it was intended for good purposes, obviously, but it's being weaponized and used and manipulated now for these people in these positions to unknowingly groom your children behind your back. So I mean, this is going on for a year now at the school behind your back, where just a Cliff Notes version, where you were sending your son to school as a boy because he's a boy. They had their own clothes there, were changing him into girl clothes and forcing him to, or encouraging at the very least, him to use the girls' restroom while at school. And it took you, I mean, as I would imagine most people, you would never, especially people have to remember, this is at a time when this wasn't so mainstream as it is today. You were really one of the first victims of this across the entire country. how did you find out about, like, how did that come to be to where you actually discovered that this was what was going on behind your back at the school system? I can only imagine how you felt.
I went for a school event and then went for lunch with my kid, and there he was in a dress. That's how I
Wow.
found out about it. I filed a grievance with the Capel, Texas school district, and they said that under their nickname policy, they were allowed to do all that. And they found that they had not violated my parental rights in any way.
You got to be kidding me.
No, no. So it's very important. You must not leave your children alone with licensed care providers. And for most conservatives, since you have school nurses and counselors at school, you can't leave your kids alone there. And that means you probably have to homeschool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is really sick, and it shows like the lengths they're willing to go to exploit children and to break up families and to force this ideology. You know, as Derrick said, this is a policy that, under its intended purpose, like if there is actual abuse going on, of course it makes sense not to relay that to the parents. And assumedly, this would be when they would be coordinating with law enforcement or CPS or whoever else to try to fix an abuse problem. But unfortunately, again, this policy has been weaponized, and then they're using it against parents like you or anyone else that for obvious reasons wouldn't want to transition their kids. It's really sick.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize how much power we have given over to the professions in the states.
Agreed.
And that includes lawyers, doctors, accountants. They have immense powers that people just don't realize. Doctors can do all kinds of things in secret to your kids, but they also, the notes that they take can have huge effects on whether you get in the military later and all sorts of things. So we've given the professions way, way too much power. One of the legislative programs that I work on in Texas is reining back the professions and pulling them back. Either they have to take liability for what they do, or they just don't get those privileges.
And Jeff, just out of curiosity, man, like, I mean, this happened, when he was 2, 3 years old, something like that is when it first started with
Yes.
your now ex-wife. I mean, and there's no excuse for it either way, but I mean, do you think this is one of those situations where, like, he just picked up a Barbie doll one day and she went with that, or is it, or did, like, I mean, how do you think that this came about from her? I believe that these people suffer from, I don't remember the term of it, but when a parent truly wants their child to have some sort of disease or illness or something because they get the attention from it. I believe that a lot of these parents who are grooming their children and transitioning them suffer from whatever that condition is called. But, like, do you think that's what this was, or, like, was it just I mean, kids are kids. I mean, a 2 or 3 year old is not even, I mean, a 15-year-old is not old enough to make these decisions, let alone 2 or 3 years old. So, like, how do you think that this kind of came about originally from the mother?
So there's 3 answers to that question. The first one is what I call the nominal answer, the answer that she officially gave in court in sworn testimony, which is not the true answer.
Sure.
What she said in court was James and my ex-wife were at Target, and there was a purse with a unicorn on it, and he really wanted that silver purse. So that's when she got a little suspicious. Then a few days later, he asked for a girl's toy in a Happy Meal at McDonald's, and that's when she suspected that he might be transgender. That's her official story.
That's insane. I mean,
yes.
I had a strawberry blanket or a strawberry shortcake blanket when I was an infant and little kid.
Yep.
That didn't mean that I wanted to be a girl. That just happened to be, when I was less than a year old. I guess that's what I liked, the colors I liked when I was at the store. Who knows?
Yeah, 100%. And then there's the answer that I think we all kind of recognize as a generally applicable explanation for people on the left, right? Since my ex-wife has now become a leftist, it is a form of virtue signaling. It says, I'm a good person, I'm tolerant of it. And I can explain, later if you want, the change in worldview that happened on the left from roughly the late 1960s to now, which leads them to think they're being benevolent when they do this. I can kind of explain it from their point of view. And it's even more shocking when you hear it.
I think that'd be a good idea, because that again lays the foundation, because obviously we're going to get into all the corruption that you saw in the courts and everything else here as the story progresses. But yeah, I think that would be a good way to lay the foundation for everyone.
Okay, so really in the 20th century, there was a revolution in how human beings understand what it means to be a person.
Yes.
Let me just tell you how this works, just like in the simplest analogy. I've explained this to the most normie conservatives, and they understand what I'm saying when I do it this way. My great-great-grandfather got land in Texas under the Homestead Act. And just to let you know, it was the amount of land you can circumnavigate barefoot from sunup to sundown. That's how much land you have. So he trained himself to run barefoot in cactus territory. And he got a huge spread from that, okay? This guy literally in his 80s could outwork me as a teenager. He cut acres of land with a scythe. And he stayed fit from that all his life. And he could literally he worked me into the dirt, man, to where I literally could not walk home. Like, he could kill me. This guy was tough as nails. I mean, he ate 10 penny nails for breakfast. You know what I mean? These kind of guys. So if you were to ask him, as a farmer and a rancher, do you feel like you're actualizing your real self? Are you fulfilled as a person, as a farmer and rancher? You probably would have spent 3 or 4 hours explaining the question to him, because he thought of his work as how he provided for his family, got his kids off to college. It's how he did things. It was a tool to do things. It wasn't who he was. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
There was a transformation, though, where we began to think of our work as who we are. Our identity gets wrapped up in our work in a certain way, not in our families and our ancestors and our nations. It becomes wrapped up in these local things around us. And for the left, what happened is it wound up, because of a combination of Freudian psychology that entered the mainstream way of thinking in academia in the 60s and the sexual liberation movement, which came together. What you get is a belief on the left that your sexual identity is your central core of your identity. Whereas you and I think it's a behavior.
Yeah.
Sexuality is a behavior. You know, I had a discussion with an NBC producer one time. He got me alone. I think he was recording me to do a gotcha interview. And he said, "Hey, Jeff, you're Orthodox Christian, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah." It was Saturday. And he said, "Well, can I go to church with you tomorrow?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll pick you up from the hotel. You know, we start at 8, we end at 11. We stand up a lot. Be ready." You know, and he said, "Well, the problem is I'm gay," like a real gotcha type deal. And I said, well, hey, man, like we all, you know, we try to make Sunday a sinless day. You know, we all have to fast from our sins. So from the time you go to sleep to the time you get out of church at 11, don't be gay. Just stop being gay for that time. And it didn't compute for him. Like, he's like, "But I can't be who I really am." And I said, "That's a behavior you can stop. Your sexuality is a behavior." And I said, "See, you think you're a biological computer primarily programmed to satisfy unconscious desires. But I think you're a soul, an immortal soul that should be afforded infinite dignity." That's the real disagreement we have. It's not over you being gay. Why don't we talk about that? And the guy started crying.
Yeah.
But that's the disagreement that's happening. So when they look at a child that has no sexual identity, because they don't get that till after puberty,
sure,
they have no sexual identity, what they see is a child with no identity. And by giving a sexual identity to a child, they feel they're being benevolent by giving the child an identity by which they can express themselves in the world. Now, it's perverse, but you can see that it follows quite logically from their belief in this kind of expressive individualism that developed in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. That's why they do it. So there's a kind of virtue signaling it's not just making yourself look good, but it's deeply rooted in how they think about what a human being is. And it's an incorrect way of thinking about what a person is. The third answer is the self-interested answer with my ex-wife. I actually don't think she believes my son is transgender. I think she picked the son that looks the most like me. I mean, in James's childhood photos, he looks identical to me at his age.
Yeah.
I pity the poor boy because he's going to look like me when he gets older. But, you know, hopefully I'll be able to teach him some game and he'll get a good wife, you know. But
that's right. That's right.
But I think she picked him and she's doing it mainly to hurt me. That's
certainly
the three answers.
Well, it certainly seems that way, especially given all the other data and information that you've presented, that there doesn't appear to be a real, I mean, again, not that there's any real cases when somebody's 3 years old, but there seems to be no legitimate reason for any of this to have gone forward in any way whatsoever. Guys, we've got to take a quick break here from our sponsors, and we're going to be right back with even more.
Hey, folks, it's your buddy John Rich here and co-founder of Old Glory Bank. Let me ask you a question. Why would you trust your banking with people that hate you? Well, you shouldn't. We're building a freedom economy, and now we have a pro-America bank. It's called Old Glory Bank. Check it out at oldglorybank.com and open yourself an account today.
Old Glory Bank is a full-service, FDIC-insured online bank with business and consumer banking and customers in all 50 states. It takes just 8 minutes to open an account at oldglorybank.com.
I couldn't give anything a higher endorsement.
I would be remiss had I not include Cardio Miracle on my very short list of secrets.
It's the real deal. It's a real product. It's not another supplement.
I'm operating about 6 to 8 hours, and I've noticed that being on this Cardio Miracle has made a huge difference.
Since I started taking Cardio Miracle, about 8 months into it, the benefits have been fantastic.
You know, if I get hungry, then I just have a Cardio Miracle.
Not only is it safe, but it's necessary to take Cardio Miracle to stay well.
This let me sleep, it's filling up more energy, more get up and go, and it's all because of what this company does.
For me as a doctor, Cardio Miracle is a staple.
Cardio Miracle to me is hope in a glass.
To try Cardio Miracle for yourself and get a special fan discount, go to the host page right now and click the link for Cardio Miracle.
Guys, thank you for staying with us. And the best way to support our program and all the programs on Patriot TV is by supporting our sponsors. That's what really is going to make a difference there and allow us to keep bringing you the news the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear. Jeff, I want to get right back into your story because we've got limited time and I want to get every detail we can out to the public.
Well, so eventually this, this culminated in an original divorce trial. And there's a guy named Blake Mitchell. He's a psychologist and a custody evaluator. I name names.
Yeah, good.
Blake Mitchell. He works out of Frisco, Dallas, and Collin County here in Texas. He does custody evaluations for the courts here, and he's a despicable liar who defrauds the courts repeatedly. He asked me what my number one issue was in the divorce, and I said my number one issue is she is tampering with my son's gender identity. He investigated that for a year and charged me $50,000 for the trouble and said that he found no evidence that she was tampering with my son's gender identity. Now, knowing what all we know now, you can understand what a lie that was.
Yes.
And just so people are aware, this is in Texas.
Yes.
Okay, this isn't California. This isn't New York. This isn't Oregon or Washington, D.C. or Chicago. This is in Texas, of all places, that this is happening, and it's continued to happen. And so I just wanted to make sure people were aware that this is happening in the red states, the places that we feel like we would be safe from these things and have elected officials who would stand up for people like Jeff in this situation. And a bunch of spineless jellyback rhinos not only did nothing, they were complicit in a lot of this throughout this journey and out this story. So I just wanted to make that very clear for people who are just now tuning in.
And on top of that, Frisco, Little Elm, McKinley, that whole area of Texas, these are red suburbs outside of Dallas. Little Elm is where you had that lady go to war with the school board over this stuff. Maybe a year ago, I might be a little off on the timeline now, but I know she eventually drugged some other people onto the school board. Same thing, fighting this ideology in the schools there in the just outside Dallas.
That's right. It's everywhere, and that's what I'm trying to tell parents. Your kids are not safe just because you're in a conservative state. You have to be very watchful. So this guy actually said that I made a false accusation against my ex-wife, that she wasn't trying to transition my son, and on that basis recommended to the court that I get less than standard possession. And so I was punished by not being able to see my kids as much because he said I made this false accusation. And then right after the divorce, she immediately doubled down again. And the medical records from Dr. Pape, P-A-P-E, she's a pediatrician in Flower Mound, Texas, was my son's pediatrician. Dr. Pape recommended that James be transitioned to a girl very soon after this divorce. And in the medical records, they had planned to chemically castrate him at age 8 or 9. That was Dr. Jennifer Pape in Flower Mound.
Good God.
So that led me, to start really pushing back. I let everybody know what the pediatrician was doing. They threatened to sue me, all this stuff. So then we wind up getting into another trial because my ex-wife sued me again to try to get sole control of the boy. And she wanted to force me to say that he's a girl when I'm around him, to use female pronouns, to stop cutting his hair, and to never present him as a boy to third parties. So she sued me in court to do this. So we had another trial. This time it was a jury trial. It finally happened in 2019. The judge heard all the evidence. I brought in the best experts on my side of the issue. I brought in Dr. Levine, who ran the first gender clinic in the United States in the 1970s, and they shut their clinic down after 4 years because their data showed they were harming patients.
Yeah.
So I brought him in. He's the most knowledgeable person on these medical procedures than anybody in the world. They brought in Johanna Olsen Kennedy, who runs the largest gender clinic in America at LA Children's Hospital, which just happens to be the gender clinic my son's in right now. And Johanna Olsen Kennedy, I put her in a deposition and I asked her one simple question. I said, what is your medical justification as a medical doctor for amputating healthy body parts from children? And she looked me straight in the eye and didn't skip a second. It was truly speaking from what she believed. She said, well, we remove them because if they're causing psychological distress, they're not healthy body parts.
Wow.
Opposing counsel was in the room and she literally dropped her pen on the floor and she left the room. She started getting ill.
Oh, I bet.
And they did not put Johanna Olsen Kennedy on the stand. They were not going to put that woman in front of a Texas jury. So I got 50-50 custody, no child support, and a check on all medical procedures from that 2019 trial. So I won that trial, hands down.
Yeah.
The liberal judges in Dallas County got together with the Coons Fuller Law Firm, which is the largest and most powerful family law firm in the state of Texas. They are the largest donor to judicial campaigns in the state of Texas. And they got my case transferred to the 301st District Court under Judge Mary Brown. I call her Bloody Mary Brown. So I have a jury verdict that gives me 50-50 custody, no child support, and a check on all medical procedures. Bloody Mary Brown systematically, through temporary orders over a period of 12 months, stripped me of all my parental rights and put me on supervised visitation. Why did she put me on supervised visitation? Because, one, I had passed the law in Texas. I successfully lobbied for a law in Texas outlawing these procedures, protecting my son, which is why I did it. Cost me a couple $100,000 of my own money in 6 years, but eventually I got the Republicans to do it. Why did it take 6 years? That's a good question, because it's the most morally obvious question since slavery, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely.
So I also ran for office. And I ran for office because they took out 3 key sentences from the bill that I wrote, and that would have classified these procedures as felony child sexual abuse, which in Texas would get you life in prison. And what that would mean is parents could not take their children out of state to do these procedures to them. You can't take your kid out of state to do child abuse. So it would have shut all that down. You would have to move to another state, spend a year and become a citizen in that state, then you could do it. But you couldn't just take them to a gender clinic and castrate your boy. So because I was speaking out and using my case as an example, Judge Mary Brown said that I was violating a gag order. My political speech running for office was violating a gag order. And on that basis, took my children away from me, and she put me on supervised visitation.
Oh, it's insane.
She used a company called Forensic Counseling Services out of Dallas to do the supervision. It was specified. Normally, it's not specified. Normally, I'd get to pick the supervisor, but she specified it. They are gay and transgender psychologists, and they refused to let me change my son out of a dress, and they refused to let me pray with my son. So I didn't go to any of those visits. So after I didn't go to any of those visits for 6 months, The judge allowed my ex-wife to move to California, saying, hey, Mr. Younger's not visiting his children, so you can move wherever you want. So do you see how the judges work? They create the conditions where you can't comply.
Yes.
And then they use the fact that you're not complying as a basis to take your children. That's how it works in family court.
When in reality,
and to clarify, a jury gave you 50-50 custody, and then these corrupt people transferred it to a different district. I don't know how they did that. And then this judge systematically took your children away from you, to clarify, correct?
That is correct. That's exactly what happened.
And that's another quick question. So when was this a district did either of you live in the district that they transferred the case to? And if not, how do they justify that?
It was a different judge in the same county. So we didn't change counties, right?
Okay.
And it's important to know that it was a Republican judge, Judge Wheelis, W-H-E-L-E-S-S, Judge Wheelis, the administrative judge for the region that assigned me to this liberal court. It was a Republican that did it.
Yeah.
What happened was they needed a pretext to remove the judge that gave me 50-50 custody. She went onto her Facebook page and, not mentioning my case at all, just said, everybody gets a fair trial in my court. And on that basis, they recused her, saying that she had made comments about previous cases, which is ridiculous.
That's insane.
Judges say that every election season. Everybody gets a fair trial in my court. It's not about a specific case. But it was a pretext. That's all they needed. They moved me in there. Once that order came out from Bloody Mary Brown's court to let my son move to California, I knew right then that she was moving to castrate the boy and to evade the Texas law that I had gotten passed. So I filed an emergency mandamus with the supposedly conservative Texas Supreme Court. And I made a pretty simple argument. California had just passed its transgender kidnapping bill, so that California would no longer honor any orders from the Texas court. And that's the first thing. Second thing is that my son would lose the protection of Texas laws and go to a state that not only allows, but affirms as a good things that in Texas are considered child abuse.
Yes.
The Supreme Court of Texas, an opinion written by Justice Blacklock, I call him Black-Hearted Blacklock, and Justice Young, said absurdly that my son was no more likely to be chemically castrated in California than he would be in Texas, where it was illegal, and they allowed her to move.
Gosh.
So, and here's the thing. Family law gives judges the widest discretion to rule in the best interest of the children. So there was no legal or constitutional impediment to the Supreme Court of Texas to keep my son in Texas and safe.
And Jeff, I think it's important to clarify here, like there's no guardrails either for these judges in terms of it's their discretion as to what their opinion is in the best interest of the child. So there's no guardrails there of like, well, it's whatever's in the best interest of the child following these guidelines. To your point, they have the widest discretion possible. So these judges can literally, they do anything they want. They answer to no one. And you as a parent have basically no say-so in that. Am I correct on that? That's the way I understand it anyways.
Yeah, here's basically how family court works. Based on likability, not upon facts in the case, the judges base everything on likability. So whoever they like better, which is almost always going to be the mom, because traditional masculinity is actually basically criminalized in family court.
Yes.
If you act like a man in family court, they're just going to say you're aggressive and dangerous, right? So what they do is they usually pick the mother as the winner parent, and all evidence and everything is interpreted against the other parent. So basically what the judge does here is he says, I like this parent better, and here's how I would raise the child.
Oh.
So I'm going to order the parent I like better to raise the child the way I would raise the child. That's how family court actually works.
So if you have a left-leaning judge, they're going to side with the left-leaning parent in this situation. So really quick, shout out to Kelly Song and Dan Dreyer in the Rumble chat. Appreciate you guys for being here. You guys, this is an amazing story in bad way, actually, but Jeff's a patriot for speaking out on this. And Jeff, we really appreciate your courage and your resolve and the fight that you've had on this, man, leading the charge across the country on this issue.
Oh man, I'm just a dad. My son deserves, everything I can do for him, and he's going to get it one way or another.
Yeah.
So the way it should work in family court, and the way I'm trying to build a set of model laws to roll out to several states, the way it should work is this: if there's no criminal finding of abuse or neglect, and I mean a criminal finding, not a preponderance of the evidence under the civil rules, but a criminal finding beyond a reasonable doubt that there has been abuse or neglect, one or the other. There are two sides of the spectrum of abuse. You
Yes.
neglect children, or you're so involved with the children you hurt them. This is the two
Correct.
spectrum. So if there's been no criminal finding of abuse or neglect, under the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, no court has any authority to interfere in the parent-child relationship.
Makes
Parents can
sense.
raise their children in an infinite number of ways. We have 40,000 different Protestant denominations. We have Muslims. People can raise their kids in their traditions and the way they see fit, so long as it is not abusive and it is not neglectful. And that takes away all the discretion from the judge, because there has to be a criminal trial before he can intervene. And that's what I'm trying to get done. Now, judges, of course, hate this because the judges love to there's not much you can learn from reading philosophy, but occasionally you run across a little nugget in there. I remember reading Nietzsche when I was in college. And one thing that struck me about him, he'd never asked the question why. Like, I always was asking the question, why is a judge doing that? He doesn't ask that question. He asks a much better question, which we should ask as conservatives. What kind of person would want to do that? What kind of person would want to interfere in the parent-child relationship? What kind of parent would want to do that and go so far as to become elected to family court judge to do that? There's a judge in Denton County, and I haven't been in his court. It's the only reason I'm not going to give you his name, because I actually haven't personally been in his court. But I've talked to 5 people who witnessed this. A father, understandably, got very upset in court because he had his kids 50% of the time, and then now he's going to see his kids 10% of the time. He's understandably upset, right?
Yeah.
So the judge has him arrested for being disruptive in the court. He brings him out after about 6 hours after he had, quote, cooled down. And the judge told this man in front of witnesses in the courtroom, I am a family court judge. I ruin people's lives. You will not speak to me like this. And I think that exemplifies the kind of person that wants to be a family court judge. They want to tell other people how to raise their kids. So that's how it actually works. So I go up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court rules against me in a completely bizarre liberal ruling from a supposedly conservative Supreme Court of Texas.
Yeah.
Now I'm in a trial in California, and LA County, other than San Francisco, the most leftist place on earth.
Yeah,
like
pretty
it's
much.
ground zero. It's ground zero for the woke mind virus, right? It's basically a leftist zombified city, right? So the very first thing that happens is I file in the trial for a independent medical exam of my son. That seems reasonable, right? They're saying he's gender dysphoric. He needs to have his puberty blocked. I want to rule out other medical conditions that could be causing these things. The judge summarily denies it without a hearing or even any briefing from the other side. Just denies me an independent medical exam. The other side, in a trial, you're supposed to get discovery, right? You can ask the other side to give you evidence, and they have to provide it within 30 days. I went to trial with no evidence. They refused to give me any evidence. I didn't get even one piece of paper from them.
How is that legal?
It's not legal. And yet the judge made me provide all of their discovery. I had to provide it within 30 days or go to jail. So they got evidence. I didn't get evidence. The judge illegally seals the trial. In California, you can only seal a trial if it's a parentage action. But there's never been any doubt who the mother and father are. So it's not a parentage action. And they're not requesting paternity testing or anything. But they lied to say it was a paternity action so they could seal the case.
Oh my God, you got to be kidding me.
That means that you cannot go observe the case. The press cannot observe the case. The whole trial is secret. The transcripts are sealed. Even I can't get the transcripts. I can't get them. And they deleted all of my records from the online site. So I lost access to my own court records.
That's insane.
Whereas the opposing counsel, because she's a member of the bar, has a special portal she goes through, and she had access to all the court documents. Further, the court said there'll be no online filing, and it all has to be done by mail. So from
now
Texas,
you have to fly to California now every time you got to file something?
That's right. So he was trying to make me miss deadlines. So I had to hire people in California to do mailings for me and show up in and it cost me just so much money, man, to do this stuff.
Yeah.
So then we go to a 7-day trial. Go ahead.
If you don't mind, let the audience know real quick just how much you spent of your own funds fighting this.
In total economic costs, I broke $1.5 million this year.
That's insane. So that's $1.5 million in total, or just for this year?
That's in total. Yeah.
Okay.
This year about $300,000. Yeah.
Oh my God. And again, I just want to highlight something to our audience here real quick. So if you think about it, Jeff is fortunate enough to be in a position where he had that kind of disposable income or disposable funds to fight this. Most people are not. Most people will be out of this fight on the legal side of things very early on. I certainly couldn't afford $1.5 million in legal fees, court filings, lawyers, everything else, expert witnesses. So that's another way they're bludgeoning people to death. You can't beat a government with unlimited pockets. And since they're weaponizing the justice system against people, because it isn't just his ex-wife, this is a weaponized system. So people need to understand the average person stands zero chance winning this battle.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, I don't use lawyers anymore. Every lawyer I've had one way or another has worked with the other side to undermine my case. I mean, basically in America, the judges and the lawyers meet in back rooms and decide cases. The arguments in court mean very little, actually. So I go to trial. I bring in Miriam Grossman, who's like just as good as Dr. Levine was. She's excellent. She has a great book called Lost in Transnation. Yep. And she's an expert at this stuff. She's a psychiatrist and truly a brilliant woman. And they brought in this expert at the last minute because they decided not to use Olson Kennedy again. She was listed as the expert, but then they withdrew her again for other reasons. Quite funny. So I get this person, and I just destroy their expert on cross-examination. The judge actually just called a halt to my cross-examination. He said it's just getting emotionally abusive. Like, I just destroyed her. Like, she was just a complete idiot. She was saying things like, gender is innate and immutable. So I would just say, well, then how can somebody be gender fluid? How can you move between them?
Yeah, it kind of seems to poke holes in their own argument. Sorry to interrupt. We do have to take one more break, and then we're going to go right back, wrap up your story, and I want to get to two other things quickly in the remaining time that we have left that I think our audience really needs to hear about. So, guys, stay with us. We'll be right back.
Now we have it. Kingdom Crunch.
It's important to start breakfast off with a power-packed punch. You want a complete amino acid score, good protein. If you turn the label over and look at the back of the box, there is no added sugars in either one of these flavors, either peanut butter or acai bowl.
Peanut butter has 11 grams of high-quality protein. Acai bowl has 8. Peanut butter has 11 grams of carbohydrate, acai bowl 12, and both of them have good solid fat content at 6 grams. Very filling, very healthy.
You will be fueling yourself with high-quality fuel, starting off the day right. You can even use Kingdom Crunch as a snack in the middle of the day if you just have a craving and you want to eat something that is good for you, has a crunch, and doesn't have a lot of calories.
There you go. Diabetic friendly, keto friendly, paleo friendly, Kingdom Crunch, and
child friendly.
Hey, Patriot TV fans, feel like there's nothing on the radio for like-minded, intelligent people like yourself? Well, great news. Now you can stream Patriot TV on TuneIn during your drive to or from work. Whether you're stuck in traffic or cruising down the highway, you can catch every conversation from your favorite show hosts right in your car. No more mindless jibber-jabber. Tune in 24/7 on the road, at the gym, or wherever you are. Download the free TuneIn app now on Apple, Android, or your computer and never miss a beat. Patriot TV, now on TuneIn.
Thank you for staying with us. And guys, the only way that we're going to bypass the censorship and messaging from the mainstream media is by supporting the sponsors on Patriot TV, so we can keep bringing you programs like ours and the many others that are here that offer a conservative or alternative point of view. And Jeff, I want to just jump right back into this because I do want to. We've only got about 12 minutes left, but I want to make sure we get to the problem with the GOP and this inherent problem in divorce court that you've done such a good job highlighting, that this perverse incentive that's so backwards that explains why a lot of this does happen.
Right. Yeah, so basically, we went through the 7-day trial. The judge essentially ignored all the evidence. His ruling doesn't even mention any of the evidence I presented. And he again keeps me on supervised contact. Even my telephone calls now have to be monitored by somebody. So I have to pay somebody $100 just to make a phone call to my kids.
You've got to be kidding me.
He said that she's not even required to give the boys my birthday gifts or letters or cards. She can send those back to me if she wants to. She doesn't have to give them. And she was given all the parental rights, and mine were terminated. That's where I am.
It's
here's
just
the other
completely
thing. Like,
backwards.
This is the craziest story in the country right now. Honestly, I mean, it really is. I think this would be if the mainstream media, like, this is something like 60 Minutes should come and do like a full hour special on national TV, letting people know what's going on. I think the entire country would be shocked, because I can tell you right now on our Rumble chats and Getter and all these stuff that, like, you know, we are people who think we know what's going on, and we're shocked. I'm shocked by this every time I hear the story. And it's just so frustrating that the mainstream media people don't want to cover this story. They want to just keep this hidden, and so that they can continue doing these sorts of things everywhere. And so, man, it's really important for people out there. I don't care if you share our story or whatever. Go follow Jeff on his Twitter and social media stuff. Start sharing this story and tell people, because they will not believe it when they first hear it. And it's really important that people hear this story. So you guys need to follow Jeff and start sharing this stuff out, and make sure people are aware of what's going on in this country.
And real quick, there is a little good news on that front. And Jeff, you can get into this a little more if you'd like, but Elon Musk did share out an article on this from Not the Bee recently. So it is starting to get some more attention and some more traffic, and it needs to, because somebody needs to shut this madness down.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever watched Elon Musk with his kids, one thing you can immediately tell, that from a sincere place, deep in his heart, he loves being a dad.
Yeah.
And he brings his kids with him on even like business junkets. I mean, he loves his kids more than his business. And you know, so when he got involved, he had a child who was alienated from him with this transgender madness. And it was that event that, you know, activated him against what he calls the woke mind virus. And he says it has to be killed. It has to be eradicated. And so he's with us on this issue. But I think it's just the thing about Musk that is so interesting is how clear it is that he loves being a father. And he's a good father. And he got alienated from his child. Amazing injustice.
Yeah. If you guys haven't seen that interview he did with Jordan Peterson, it's really worth your time. I know we've played clips from it a few times, because you know, I really think that's Musk's superhero origin story. I think that's kind of what woke him up from the left. Yeah, and brought him over to our side. That was the crack in the armor. And then the longer he's been here, you know, fighting for free speech and other issues we align on, the further he's gone to the right, because he's kind of seen just how insane the left has become, pushing the trans nonsense on kids, the censorship, and everything else that they've done, that it's only solidified that. And yeah, I agree. Watching Elon Musk in Mar-a-Lago a few days ago, where he walked in with his son on his shoulders, is a great video. It shows who he really is, shows his human side.
100%. Yeah. And we need to see, you know, prominent people really, you know, Musk represents in many ways the best of our aspirations. You know, he's a you know, an Alcibiades type character. A guy that we can look up to. I mean, nobody's ever done heavy industry as good as this guy does. Nobody has had aspirations for human accomplishment really as high as this guy has. And to see that it's all rooted in his love of his children is really a lesson for America, honestly.
And then the last thing before we, cover these other stories is Elon Musk is the richest man in the entire world that we know of, and he was alienated from his own child throughout this whole thing. So like, it's no one is immune to this, and there's no amount of money that can necessarily protect us. It's going to take good people standing up and speaking out and actually putting boots on the ground and getting to work to prevent this stuff from happening, because it's coming to a town and hopefully not a house near you very soon.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is fundamentally in family courts. Once you're in the system, you just don't have any rights to your kids anymore. Your children become wards of the state, and the state will decide how you raise your kids, how much money will be spent on raising your kids. My kids' extracurricular activities were regulated by the courts. I had to get permission from the court to start a business. For 10
Unbelievable.
years. Oh yeah. People don't realize once you're in family court, they can bring a lawsuit against you forever until your children are 18. It's not like a normal civil lawsuit, which when you have a ruling, you're done.
Sure.
Right? That's one of the great things about America. In the American legal system, once there's been a lawsuit and it's been settled, even if you didn't like the way it was settled, at least it's over, right?
Yeah.
So we can move on with our lives. That's not true in family court. They can sue you over and over and over again. So I've been continuously sued for 11 years now. So because I'm under discovery rules during those lawsuits, every cash transaction, I have to save the receipt and I have to show the court. Every credit card transaction is scrutinized. All my investment activities are made public. Any businesses or partnerships I enter into, I have to be scrutinized by the court. And who would enter into a partnership with someone? Who would give somebody venture capital for a business under those conditions? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh yeah, with that guillotine hanging over your head constantly, no sane person would get involved in that. Even if you had the best idea ever, perfect business model, they're going to see where the risk is and know that this insane judge could ruin both your lives on a whim because they don't like something you said, or maybe they just didn't like breakfast that day and they want to take it out on somebody. That there's no restrictions, there's no guardrails, and it's set up to create situations like this. Jeff, I really want you to be able to get through and finish the story with what happened in court, and I think we're going to have to, if possible, I'd love to get you back on maybe one day next week to go over the other two sides to this apparently three-sided coin. Sure. That to point out, because there, as I alluded to a minute ago, there is a very perverse incentive with the family courts and divorce and child support. We also need to tackle the heart of this problem, which goes all the way up to the top at the GOP, the RNC, and the political class, and that's why we can't seem to get any real change.
Yeah, so there's a program called Title 4D, and it sounds so innocuous. It reimburses all the administrative expenses. Actually, it's 66% of the administrative expenses that states spend to collect and administer child support programs. Texas gets about $480 million. $480 million. So it's close to $500 million. The more child support they issue and the more that's collected, the more money they get reimbursed. And so the very jobs that these child support agencies use to enforce this stuff, those jobs are dependent on those federal reimbursements. And so courts are highly incentivized to issue the maximum amount of child support they can. That's why they never give equal custody. They want one parent paying child support. Further, it's the reason that you can identify for why the courts almost always give primary custody to the dysfunctional parent.
Well, Jeff,
go ahead.
we've only got a couple of minutes left. Let's, if you don't mind, can we get through where your story is, where that's currently ended? Because we've only got about 3 minutes, and I'd love to bring you back on.
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
I'm headed to an appeal. That's the only place I can go. I'm going to go to appeal, file for a stay. And I'm going to go straight up, if I have to the California Supreme Court. If I don't get relief there, I'm going to go into the federal courts.
When will you hear back on your next petition or whatever for the stay, Jeff? Do we have like a time frame on that? Or?
It'll probably be next year before I hear anything back. On the stay, I might hear back in December.
So is there potential that they go ahead and go through with this chemical castration before you get that, or is that kind of put on hold while you go through this process? What's the update there?
My gut feeling is the day the order came out, the next day James had puberty blockers injected into him.
Good Lord. Is there anything our audience could do right now to help you, and how can they find you online to stay in touch and get updates with the story?
If you want to help, even a $5 donation helps. These appeals are expensive. My cost estimates in the California court to get up to the Supreme Court is around $350,000. It's going to take me about a year. It'll take me about a year to get this all done. You can go to savejames.org, savejames.org, and just $5 goes to my legal fees. And it helps me a tremendous amount. I use paralegals to help me draft, and it pays for that kind of stuff. Legal filings are about $300 a pop in appellate courts, so it's super expensive. You can also find me on Twitter or X at Jeff Younger Show. I don't actually have a show, but my life had become so public, I felt like I was in the Truman Show, so it was kind of a joke. But I'm stuck with the handle now. I probably would have changed it, but I'm stuck with it now. And then you can also get me on Substack at jeffyounger.substack.com. And I write in detail about the problems in the GOP that led to what happened in this case, about the origins of the transgender movement, and practical ways people can politically organize for real political power.
And guys, there should be a link to Jeff's Substack in the show description there. And as you can see on the screen now, we've got his Twitter handle. Make sure you give him a follow. Because again, this is somebody that's out there actually fighting the fight that we all talk about. This is somebody that's actually involved, and not for the work that Jeff's done and the effort that he's made to highlight these things, which I'm sure has been very difficult and painful for him. We wouldn't have any idea this was going on. He's one of the few people brave enough to do something about it. And again, if you've got any disposable income that you would otherwise donate to wherever, this is a cause that is truly worthy and will help fix a systemic problem in America. And Jeff, I'm sorry we ran out of time so early. I'd love to have you back on next week to go through the other two sides of this, because I think that opens up two additional cans of worms. And that's why I think your story is so important, is because you've done such a great job documenting this along the way that we can see all these problems and how they collide to create the situation that we're now all observing from the outside, and is only going to expand if we don't put a foot down and stop it now.
I'd love to talk to you next week. Let's do that.
We'll definitely get that scheduled off air. To our audience, thank you for staying with us. Please like, share, subscribe. Help us to grow this program so we can bring more people the news the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear, and we can highlight stories like this. Hannah Faulkner is next here on Patriot TV. Please stay tuned. And thanks again, guys. We'll be back again tomorrow with even more.